Hi, and welcome to the first joint public meeting on the Combined Sewer Overflow Control Plan update for the Alewife Brook, Mystic River, and Charles River. Throughout the presentation, we'll use CSO as a shorthand for Combined Sewer Overflow. The City of Cambridge, the City of Somerville, and the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority are collaborating on updated CSO control plans to protect and improve our water resources. To the right, you can see the full MWRA sewer service area shown in blue and the cities of Cambridge and Somerville highlighted within the MWRA service area. This presentation will focus on providing an introduction and overview of the activities involved in the CSO planning process. Future meetings will include detailed discussions on the plan development. The current schedule for submitting the draft plans is June of 2023 and December of 2023 for final plans. We will begin with a brief historical background on how the sewer system evolved in this area, and we will go over some useful descriptions of commonly used terms. When combined sewers were first constructed in the 19th century, they relied on stormwater to flush waste from the city and were regarded as a public health improvement for their ability to remove sewage from the city and reduce sewer flooding and backups into homes and streets. Under the Metropolitan Sewer District, an extensive network of large intercepting sewers was constructed throughout the region to carry the combined flows out to Boston Harbor. The combined stormwater and wastewater was routed directly to the harbor without treatment and over time posed a serious public health risk and was devastating to the health of surrounding water bodies. Motivated by deteriorating conditions in Boston Harbor and later federal regulation from the Clean Water Act, treatment facilities were constructed at the outfalls to treat the combined storm and wastewater before being discharged to the harbor. However, because of the sharp increase in flows that can be seen during storm events, the sewer system reached capacity and combined sewer overflows were common before the implementation of the original long-term control plan. The history of MWRA's sewer system begins in 1876 with the start of construction on a series of sewer interceptors running for over 25 miles and connecting 18 communities to discharge points in Boston Harbor. In 1889, these efforts were consolidated under the Metropolitan Sewer District, the precursor to today's MWRA. At this point in time, all sewer networks piped combined stormwater and wastewater flows away from communities to discharge directly into Boston Harbor at Nut Island or Moon Island. Due to growing concerns over public health and the water quality of Boston Harbor, the first treatment plant was built at Nut Island in 1952, predating the Clean Water Act by 20 years. With the passage of the Clean Water Act in 1972, all flows from the sewer were required to pass through primary and secondary wastewater treatment. Primary treatment refers to physical separation of solids from the wastewater via screening and settling, while secondary treatment refers to biologic processes to treat contaminants remaining after primary treatment. MWRA, as it's known today, was established in 1985 and began the long-term control plan to reduce or eliminate CSOs. The plan ran from 1994 to 2015 and completed the construction of a consolidated wastewater treatment plant at Deer Island, which began operation in 1995 and came fully online in 2000. The Deer Island treatment plant today stands as the sole provider of wastewater treatment for the full MWRA Metro Boston sewer system. In 2022, to combat the remaining CSO problems in the Charles and Mystic watersheds, the communities of Cambridge and Somerville, along with the MWRA, each submitted proposed scopes of work to create new CSO control plans that would go into effect at the end of 2023. During large storm events, large amounts of stormwater runoff combines with existing sewer flows and can cause combined sewers to reach capacity. Most of these flows are directed to the MWRA system for treatment. However, rather than allowing capacity systems to back up into homes and roadways, the system discharges these excess flows to the receiving waters via relief points and outfalls and what is known as combined sewer overflows, or CSOs. Cambridge's sewer system is approximately 55% separated, where sewer discharges to the MWRA for treatment and the separated stormwater discharges directly to the Alewife Brook or to the Charles River. Similarly, Somerville's sewer system is approximately 10% separated, with stormwater discharging to the Alewife Brook or Mystic River. A CSO control plan is a document required under the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit that regulates combined sewer overflows. The plan lays out a series of projects and a schedule that demonstrates how a permittee will meet water quality requirements. In Massachusetts, this permit is issued by the Federal Environmental Protection Agency and the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. Once a CSO control plan is approved and implemented, any remaining CSOs should not prevent the water quality of downstream water bodies from meeting water quality standards. Proposed projects included in the CSO plan must demonstrate that the projects will meet water quality standards in a typical year. The MWRA's original CSO long-term control plan was developed for the metropolitan Boston area, including the Charles and Mystic River CSOs, and set a goal for the average number and total volume of overflow for each outfall location. Following over 25 years of major investment, the long-term control plan was successful in reducing the CSO volume discharge by 87%, permanently closed almost half of the CSO outfalls, and provided treatment for 93% of the remaining overflows. The MWRA spent $911 million and completed 35 distinct projects. While successful in many ways, there are still a few projects and evaluations underway to reduce CSOs further at several sites to meet the activation and frequency goals of the original long-term control plan. This slide shows projects in the Charles River that were completed as part of MWRA's long-term control plan. In the upper part of the project area, above the Boston University Bridge, 4 of the 6 CSOs were permanently closed or are pending further hydraulic analysis. The maximum number of overflows from any open overflow in an average year was reduced from 19 to 8 spills. In the lower part of the Charles River, 6 of the 13 CSOs were closed, and the number of overflows in an average year was reduced from 39 to 2 spills. Overall, the volume of combined sewer overflows were greatly reduced, and most of the remaining CSOs are screened and disinfected at the Cottage Farm CSO treatment facility. The cost of all of the CSO projects in the Charles River was about $90 million. This slide shows projects in the Mystic River watershed that were completed as part of the long-term control plan. In the Alewife Brook, half of the 13 CSO outfalls were closed. The maximum number of overflows from any open CSO in an average year has been reduced from 20 to 8 spills, and the volume of combined sewage spills was reduced from 26 to 6 million gallons in an average year. In the Upper Mystic, above the Amelia Earhart Dam, 2 of the 3 CSOs were closed, leaving only the treated discharges from the Somerville Marginal CSO facility. The number of overflows from this remaining CSO in an average year was reduced from 9 to 5, and the CSO volume was reduced from 7.7 to 4.5 million gallons. The CSO projects completed in the Alewife and Upper Mystic River was over $215 million. An additional project has been undertaken to further reduce overflows from the Somerville Marginal facility as part of the original CSO control plan. Most receiving waters in metropolitan Boston where CSOs were not eliminated, such as Boston Inner Harbor, were designated about 20 years ago as allowing limited CSOs, which impair water quality for only short periods of time and in very small areas. Additional CSO control beyond the long-term control plan is not required. Certain bodies of water, including the Charles River Basin, the Alewife Brook, and the Upper Mystic River, were given a variance from state water quality standards to provide more time to work on improvements. Regulatory agencies decided not to change the water quality classifications of these water bodies. Variances are allowed when discharges do not meet the requirements of the Clean Water Act, but the owners of the CSOs are working toward that goal. The current variances end on August 31st, 2024. With that history in mind, we will explore some factors for consideration as we move forward to create updated CSO control plans. Projects to separate combined sewer systems must also consider and ensure that separated sanitary and stormwater systems are designed to manage increased and new discharges. Sanitary sewer overflows, or SSOs, occur when a separated sewer system is overwhelmed by sump pumps, flat roof connections, incorrectly connected stormwater pipes, cracked or broken sewer lines that allow groundwater to get into the system, or sewer system blockages. An SSO can cause untreated sewage to back up and discharge to basements or into the street where it can flow into catch basins leading directly to the river. Programs to identify and remove potential blockages, maintain pipe integrity, and remove extraneous groundwater are important to ensure public health and further protect water quality. Similar to separate sewer systems, SSOs can occur in combined systems when similar blockages or system deficiencies occur, but also if adequate system relief through permitted CSOs isn't provided to manage the additional stormwater flows from large storm events. Flooding occurs when stormwater drainage systems are unable to manage the amount of rain running off surrounding properties and are limited by their ability to get stormwater off the street and into the storm system. Low-lying areas such as the Port in Cambridge and Ward 2 Union Square area in Somerville are particularly vulnerable to flooding. With climate change increasing the amount, frequency, and intensity of precipitations, the conveyance capacity of drainage networks needs to be carefully considered. Water quality is impacted by discharges from stormwater, CSOs, and SSOs. With CSO volumes during a typical or average year greatly reduced and over 90% of CSO volumes treated, including disinfection, stormwater discharges and upstream pollutant sources are responsible for the majority of bacterial loading to the Charles River. Once separated from sewer system, stormwater runoff is no longer treated at the wastewater treatment plant, so stormwater management strategies need to be developed to provide treatment of bacteria, nutrient, and other pollutants before discharging runoff to water bodies. Examples of treatment include green stormwater infrastructure and infiltration practices. In the Upper Mystic River, most CSOs were eliminated and the remaining CSO is treated, including disinfection. In the Alewife Brook, however, although many CSOs were eliminated and volumes reduced, there are untreated CSOs that can have an effect on the water quality of this small water body in addition to stormwater impacts. Separated stormwater that discharges freely to the Charles and Alewife carry with it pollutants such as bacteria, nutrients, metals, and other pollutants picked up from surfaces as stormwater runoff moves towards the drainage system. Today, stormwater represents the overall greatest source of pollution for the two water bodies. Treatment of stormwater through measures to reduce, infiltrate, and treat runoff needs to be included in updated CSO control plans. Already our communities are feeling the impact of a changing climate with increasing rainfall intensities and extreme events as well as increasing sea levels. It is important that our plans consider these impacts. Stormwater flooding from climate change has been studied in both Cambridge and Somerville using hydraulic and hydrologic models to predict where flooding may occur. The image on the left shows where flooding is predicted to occur in Cambridge for the 10% probability storm in 2070 from participation if we do not make any changes to our system. This image shows that primarily inland flooding with some coastal flooding along the Alewife is expected. Capacity limits in the drainage network will cause inland flooding on streets, especially in low-lying areas of the city. On the right, a similar analysis was completed for Somerville with expected inland flooding caused by rainfall. Again, low-lying areas of the city, especially along the Mystic River, are prone to the deepest flooding. A number of strategies can be taken to reduce the occurrence of combined sewer overflows. One option is to separate stormwater from the sewer system. Sewer separation requires extensive disruption to neighborhoods to construct separate pipes for sewer and stormwater. Following separation, CSO outfalls can typically be closed as the stormwater that causes the sewer capacity to be exceeded is now conveyed through an entirely separate pipe network. While very effective at avoiding CSOs, this strategy needs to be done in tandem with other stormwater management practices to ensure that pollutants carried by stormwater runoff are not sent to the waterways. Another strategy includes treating overflow volume before it is discharged to downstream bodies, similar to the treatment provided at Cottage Farm on the Charles River. While typically not treated to standards required by wastewater effluent, primary treatment, screening, and disinfection could substantially decrease the impacts that an overflow has to downstream water bodies. Overflows can also be avoided by adding relief to the system through increased capacity through storage of stormwater or combined sewer flows during rain events, or to increase overall system conveyance. Any project that proposes to increase overall system conveyance must also consider the impacts of downstream systems. Green infrastructure is a strategy that uses natural processes to manage and infiltrate stormwater before it gets to the drainage or combined sewer systems. Examples of green infrastructure include rain gardens, permeable pavement, rainwater harvesting systems, and green roofs. Green infrastructure is beneficial in improving water quality and capturing rainfall for smaller storm events. MWRA's long-term control plan included a range of strategies to find the most cost-effective and site-specific solutions. Not all CSO control strategies are viable in all areas, given various constraints like available space, public acceptance, and adverse hydraulic or flooding impacts. However, selected and constructed projects included the Union Park CSO treatment facility in the south end, shown on the upper left, the South Boston storage tunnel to remove CSO and most stormwater discharges from urban beaches, redirection of some flow to less sensitive areas such as the reserve channel, and storage at BOS 019 in Charlestown, shown in two figures on the right. In addition to new storage and treatment facilities such as Union Park, MWRA upgraded its existing facilities. System-wide, 40 out of 86 outfalls were closed, 5 of which were effectively closed by only discharge in extreme events. The total cost to MWRA ratepayers was $911 million, and the total is well over $1 billion when adding costs paid by CSO communities. Another strategy used in the MWRA long-term control plan was sewer separation. This means that sanitary flows and stormwater were separated into different pipe networks, with only wastewater sent to the treatment plant. The last separation project to occur was along Alewife Brook and included 211 acres immediately east of Fresh Pond, the city's drinking water reservoir. The project required major infrastructure improvements with over 55,000 feet of new piping installed, 6 bioretention basins, many new deep sump pump catch basins and grit systems to treat the stormwater before it discharges to the newly created 3.5-acre stormwater wetland. Since the combined flows are now separated, it allowed the permanent closure of one of the most active CSO outfalls to Alewife Brook. In addition to water quality concerns from stormwater discharges, sewer separation also results in new stormwater flows to the receiving waters, sometimes requiring construction of new stormwater outfall. The construction of the Alewife stormwater wetland was necessary to slow the speed and volume of the stormwater discharge to the fragile and flood-prone Alewife Brook. The downstream impacts of newly separated stormwater need to be considered. With MWRA's long-term control plan soon coming to a close, the end of our work is not done in the various water bodies. Cambridge, Somerville, and the MWRA are each developing updated CSO plans to further reduce CSOs and improve water quality. The next few slides will discuss how we evaluate and select components of our updated CSO control plans. The evaluation starts with the end in mind. What are our goals? Goals for this project are to develop alternatives for reducing CSOs, including full elimination. We also need to understand and evaluate the impacts these alternatives have on water quality in the Charles River, Alewife Brook, and Mystic River. Before we can move forward with identifying alternative and analysis, we are coordinating on updating the typical year to reflect climate conditions. This initial presentation and meeting is our kickoff meeting, and we intend to continue to engage with the community through different outreach efforts throughout the planning process, and to ensure that the impacts of CSOs on environmental justice communities are understood, considered, and addressed. In order to understand the impact of various alternatives on the local and regional systems, an advanced and integrated hydraulic model will be used. Cambridge, Somerville, and MWRA have separately built portions of this model over the past 2 decades, so it includes details down to individual streets and system information throughout the MWRA service area. We are collaborating to ensure that these separate models are accurately represented in the combined model, and the model reflects current conditions. The model will give us insight into each option's performance not only at a regional level but also at the neighborhood scale. The model will be checked using measured rainfall and CSO discharge data and continues to be updated and rechecked as infrastructure projects are completed. Using the hydraulic model with typical year rainfall as input allows an apples-to-apples comparison of proposed control alternatives. The typical year is explained more on the next slide. CSO control plans include goals for annual frequency and volume of CSO discharge at each outfall based on a typical year rainfall. Because actual years vary in terms of rainfall, EPA recommends that CSO system performance be evaluated using a typical year so that improvements over time can be evaluated. The typical year is not an average across all years. It has to represent not only average annual total rainfall, but it must also contain storms of various sizes and intensities, and the average number of each size storm should match the long-term average number of those types of storms. Historical rainfall data are analyzed to construct a 365-day continuous rainfall data set, and that typical year is fed into the collection system model to estimate the number and size of CSOs that will occur on average. As part of the planning process, a new typical year needs to be developed and agreed upon by Cambridge, Somerville, MWRA, DEP, and EPA. The current MWRA long-term CSO control plan used a typical year based on 1992, with storms added to make it more similar to the average of the decades leading up to the start of the long-term control plan. As we move forward to create updated CSO control plans, a new typical year based on more recent data is being developed. A long historical record such as the past 25 years is recommended to develop a robust average. In order to develop a climate-sensitive typical year, we are consulting with several climate change experts and will review with EPA, DEP, and the community. We plan to engage the public throughout the planning process. The main avenue for presentation and discussion of milestones for the CSO planning process will be public meetings. Additional outreach events will be open to all but will target historically underrepresented populations. Throughout the process, we will develop materials that will raise awareness, educate, and solicit feedback about the process. The goal is to ensure that all stakeholders affected by the plan can provide input throughout the process, and that in particular, the environmental justice communities that are most affected by CSOs are part of the decision-making process. We quickly went over a broad brush of the process to update our CSO control plans. Following this presentation, there will be a question and answer period where members of the Cambridge, Somerville, and MWRA teams will be available to answer your questions. Before we open it up for questions and answers, let's do a final review of some important dates. The schedule required by the variances directs Cambridge, Somerville, and the MWRA to each submit draft updated CSO control plans by June 30th, 2023. A comment period will follow the draft submittals, and final updated CSO control plans will be due to EPA and DEP by December 31st, 2023. The schedule is extremely tight, but we are each working to coordinate our efforts to develop our individual plans and to seek public input during important milestones. We will be hosting additional joint public meetings and undertaking individual outreach activities throughout the process. Some potential topics for joint public meetings include the development of a new typical year, how CSO control project alternatives are evaluated, measured, and ranked, what alternatives should be evaluated for CSO control and their financial feasibility, the development of what projects to include for CSO control, and a proposed schedule for implementing the CSO control plans. We have listed some possible topics to start the discussion. Please put your questions and comments in the Q&A or raise your hand if you wish to unmute to ask a question or to comment. You will also be able to submit written comments by submitting an email to the project managers in Cambridge, Somerville, and the MWRA.